On November 12th, 2019, Jacob Sockness posted another chat with Magi-Chan on Reddit. My video on the original is linked below. Jacob begins by asking Chris to verify whether this conversation really happened, and he affirms his love for Chris while also stating that there are many women who want to date him, in case you thought Jacob wasn't delusional. In recent weeks, information has come forward about Jacob that many believe will make Chris want to no longer associate with him. Chris was convinced by his friends to not allow Jacob to enter his home. Unfortunately, Chris believes that the evil actions of Jacob can be attributed to GiBi, a god that Jacob invented. Ever since then, Jacob has been trying to separate Chris from his friends and run damage control. This conversation is another step toward tricking Chris into allowing them to meet. In their last conversation, Jacob used Chris's faith in the dimensional merge to trick Chris into thinking that the two of them had to have sex in order to stop GiBi. He has been criticized for this, and so in the following conversation he attempts to backpedal. This conversation is about the Atuant prophecy. This is a prophecy originally from the Sonichu comic books that explains how Chris was able to awaken his Sonichu powers. Now it has been expanded to talk about our dimension merging with the dimension of Sonichu and Chris becoming a goddess. The conversation is between Magi-Chan, who is one of Chris's husbands, and Mishiro, who is an invention of Jacob's. I will now highlight the most disturbing aspects of the conversation and summarize it for you. Magi-Chan states that Chris might feel the desire to distance himself from Jacob, but he can assure Chris that Jacob is a good person. Because Chris trusts Magi-Chan, whatever Jacob makes Magi-Chan say in this dialogue, Chris will instantly believe. This is why Jacob is so dangerous. Mishiro states that Jacob, in a past life, was an alien with powerful magic, and Magi-Chan reminds Mishiro, but he's really reminding the audience and Chris, that Chris and Jacob used to be siblings in that past life, and thus Chris has alien powers too. Magi-Chan asks if it is possible to mature, quote, baby Jake, unquote, a term that refers to Jacob's mannerisms. Jacob is autistic and often behaves like a child. Mishiro says that this is impossible, and that Jacob is limited by his autism. He does, however, say that Jacob has healing powers. Jacob stated recently on Twitter that his doctor believes he will live past 100 years old, which anyone who sees his out-of-shape physique can guess to be not true. Jacob has Mishiro say that Jacob can heal people with hugs. This seems to be an attempt to convince Chris to let Jacob hug him, as his hugs are magical. Magi-Chan asks Mishiro if they can stop the war on the good trolls. This is a reference to Chris's friends who are attempting to convince him that Jacob is dangerous. Mishiro says this is impossible, as GiBi will kill anyone who attempts to interfere with Jacob. Magi-Chan asks if the people of the fictional planet of Kitasuna can overthrow GiBi, since he is evil, and Mishiro refuses, even threatening to turn Magi-Chan over to the Empire for suggesting such a thing. Mishiro then blames the trolls, which refers to anyone who is bad-mouthing Jacob, for Jacob's bad deeds. He says that Chris should call Jacob as often as possible on the phone, and says Chris is a mother figure to Jacob. In the span of this short conversation, he has called Chris Jacob's sister, mother, and lover. Then they get to the point of this conversation. Magi-Chan no longer wants Jacob and Chris to have sex. He wants Jacob to impregnate Alan Christopher. Chris is a male-to-female transgender, and Alan is female-to-male, and so they could produce a child. The fulfillment of the prophecy requires Chris to have a daughter. Mishiro states that Jacob, who is childlike, could be a test for Chris. If Chris takes in Jacob, as in he adopts him and has him live with him, and then raises him well, then it would show that he is ready to have an actual baby. This is, of course, what Jacob wants, to live and have a relationship with Chris, and he is holding the fulfillment of the prophecy, the dimensional merge, and the awakening of Chris's goddess powers hostage. Magi-Chan then explicitly says that there is no need for sex between Jacob and Chris. Chris had previously been turned off by the idea of sex with Jacob. This is obviously Jacob's way of convincing Chris to let them live together with the promise that sex would not be necessary. People made Chris aware of this nonsense on Twitter later that day, hoping he would see right through it, but he unfortunately believes that Magi-Chan has confirmed this conversation as real. Chris now believes that this is what he should do. He has begun blocking all of the people that Jacob lists as trolls. For Alan Christopher, this was too much, and he has cut all ties with Jacob and Chris. At the moment, it does not look like it will be easy to convince Chris that Jacob is manipulating him for his own benefit.